As I stepped in, my mother-in-law said, "My daughter's children get their tea first. Her kids can wait for leftovers." My children sat silent before their empty plates. My sister-in-law chimed in, "They ought to know their place." I kept quiet. I gathered my kids and walked out. They assumed I was beaten. Minutes later, their house flooded with screams they never saw coming. Oh, you guys are not going to believe this story. It's about the day I stood in my in-law's doorway, watched my 9-year-old daughter stare at an empty plate, and heard my mother-in-law declare, "My daughter's kids eat first. Her kids can wait for scraps." Can you even imagine? That's when 6 years of blind generosity shattered into a million pieces, and I decided their entire world was about to collapse. But to truly understand the sheer, delicious chaos that followed, you need to know how I became their personal ATM in the first place. How 6 years of my hard-earned money slowly transformed me into someone they thought they could humiliate without consequence. It all started innocently enough, 2 months before my wedding. Addison, my mother-in-law, called me at work. Her voice was trembling, thick with what sounded like genuine distress. Property taxes had unexpectedly skyrocketed. Could I help, just this once? $3,000. She swore she'd pay it back in months. I was at my office, a senior project manager at a pharmaceutical company, staring at the number she'd written down. $3,000 wasn't pocket change, but it wasn't impossible either. I wrote that check the same day. Wyatt, my fiancé, was so grateful. He hugged me tight, saying his family was lucky to have me, that not everyone would be so generous to people they barely knew. What he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I wasn't being generous. I was being desperate. My parents died in a car accident during my junior year of college, leaving me with a modest inheritance and a loneliness that ached for family connection. Wyatt's family, they felt like everything I'd lost. His mother baked pies, his father told hilarious stories, and his sister's kids, Harper and Liam, had started calling me Aunt Leah within weeks. When Addison hugged me and whispered that I was the daughter she always wanted, something inside me healed a little. I thought I'd found my place. I thought I'd found home. I had no idea I'd actually just made my first payment into a system that would, eventually, bleed me dry. Just 3 months after the wedding, another crisis. Roger, Wyatt's father, needed a medical procedure. Insurance covered most of it, but not all. This time, $5,000. Addison cried on the phone, explaining how embarrassed Roger was, how proud he was, how much it meant that family was stepping up. I signed that check even faster than the first. Her gratitude, it made me feel needed in a way I'd never experienced. That's when I should have seen the pattern. That's when I should have asked why Roger's other adult daughter, Peyton, wasn't contributing. Why his own savings couldn't cover a $5,000 gap. Why every single family crisis somehow landed on my shoulders. But I didn't ask. I didn't want to be difficult. I wanted to be the good daughter-in-law, the one who understood that family helps family, the one who belonged. My career was taking off. Senior project manager at 31 was impressive, and the salary reflected it. I earned nearly 3 times what Wyatt made teaching high school biology. His family noticed. Oh, they noticed immediately. Instead of stating it outright, Addison would touch my arm, her eyes seemingly warm, saying how proud she was that Wyatt had married someone so successful, so capable of providing stability. I didn't realize she was calculating my worth down to the dollar. The requests escalated. After that first year, they came with a precision that I was too blind to see. Addison would call just days after I mentioned a promotion, suddenly facing a roof emergency that needed $15,000. The contractor's estimate would magically arrive in my office that same afternoon. Roger's truck would die right after my year-end bonus hit our account, requiring an immediate replacement because how could he get to his part-time hardware store job without reliable transportation? Then came Peyton's crisis. Her divorce from an abusive husband turned ugly, and suddenly she needed a custody lawyer to protect Harper and Liam. $12,000 in legal fees. Addison called me, sobbing, explaining that family sticks together, that we protect our own. How could I say no to protecting children? I wrote that check without even discussing it with Wyatt, because how could I? What I didn't ask was why Peyton's own parents, who owned their house outright and had retirement savings, couldn't cover their daughter's legal fees. Why every family emergency skipped right over the people who should have been first in line and landed directly on me. I was too busy trying to prove I belonged to notice I was being used. 6 years. 6 years of writing checks for emergencies that always seemed to coincide with my bonuses and raises. 6 years of funding roof repairs, truck replacements, legal fees, and medical bills. 6 years of being told I was generous, selfless, and exactly the kind of daughter-in-law every mother dreams of having. What I failed to track, during all those years, was the complete absence of reciprocity. The one-way street our relationship had become, where I gave everything and received nothing but more requests. When Mia was hospitalized with severe pneumonia and I desperately needed help with Evan, Addison was too busy with her church women's group. When I suffered a miscarriage and could barely get out of bed, Peyton couldn't take time off from her part-time boutique job to bring meals or help with the kids. When Wyatt and I were struggling in our marriage and desperately needed a weekend away, suddenly everyone had scheduling conflicts and prior commitments. But when they needed money, I was family, sacred, obligated, expected to sacrifice without hesitation. Wyatt never questioned it. He'd been raised in a household where his mother's word was absolute law, where Peyton's position as the biological daughter granted her a status I could never achieve, no matter how long we were married or how much money I contributed. He genuinely believed that financial support equaled love, that writing checks proved our commitment to family bonds. I wanted so badly to be a good wife, to honor his family the way he honored them, that I ignored the growing unease in my gut. I ignored how they never asked about my work stress or celebrated my achievements. I ignored how they praised Peyton endlessly for managing her part-time boutique job while dismissing my 60-hour weeks as just corporate work that anyone could do. I ignored how they displayed dozens of photos of Harper and Liam throughout their house, but not a single picture of Mia and Evan. I ignored everything because I was terrified of being the difficult daughter-in-law, the outsider who didn't understand their ways, the woman who'd married their son but never quite fit into their world. So, I kept writing checks and pretending everything was fine. I kept showing up for Sunday dinners where I was expected to help cook and clean while Peyton sat at the table scrolling through her phone. I kept volunteering to host holidays at our house because Addison's back hurt too much to handle the work, then watching her play with Harper and Liam for hours without any apparent pain. I kept being the ATM they could rely on, the solution to every financial problem, the daughter-in-law who never said no. Until that day. The day I walked in and saw my children sitting in front of empty plates while their cousins feasted. The day I heard Addison say my kids could wait for scraps. The day Peyton told my babies they needed to know their place. That's when 6 years of willful blindness shattered. In an instant. That's when I finally understood what I'd really been funding all this time. Not family connection. Not belonging. Just my children's systematic humiliation at the hands of people who thought my money was more valuable than my kids' dignity. I gathered Mia and Evan and left that house without saying a word. Because I didn't trust myself to speak. Because if I started talking, I'd start screaming. And I needed to be cold and calculated for what came next. In the car, Evan quietly asked if we were in trouble. Mia stared out the window, tears running down her face that she didn't bother to wipe away. And I made a decision, right there in their driveway. I was done being the good daughter-in-law. Done writing checks for people who thought my children were disposable. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. Started the car. Drove home in silence, my mind already calculating exactly what I needed to do, how long I needed to wait, exactly how I was going to make them understand what they just lost. 18 minutes. That's how long my children had sat with empty plates, watching their cousins eat. In 18 minutes, I was going to return the favor. The morning had started like any other Tuesday. I dropped the kids at summer camp, sat through 3 back-to-back client presentations, and fielded approximately 17 emails that all seemed to require immediate attention. By 4:30 p.m., I was still stuck in a conference room, listening to our lead researcher explain why we needed to adjust the testing timeline. That's when I realized, with sinking dread, that I wasn't going to make it to pick up Mia and Evan by 5 p.m. I texted Addison from under the table, trying to look like I was taking notes instead of asking for help. Running late with work. Any chance you could grab the kids from camp and keep them until 7? So sorry for the short notice. Her response came back within 30 seconds. Of course. Would love to spend extra time with them. Take all the time you need. I should have known right then that something was wrong. Addison never volunteered for extra time with my children. There was always an excuse. Her back hurt, a church commitment, feeling under the weather. The eagerness in those 3 sentences should have triggered every alarm in my system, but I was too relieved to question it. I sent back a grateful "thank you," and turned my attention back to the presentation, already mentally calculating how quickly I could escape. I didn't escape quickly. The researcher had questions. The project director had concerns. By the time I made it to my car, it was already 6:45 p.m., and I was texting Addison again to let her know I was on my way. She responded with a smiley face emoji, and told me dinner was ready whenever I arrived. Dinner. She'd made them dinner. That should have been my second warning. I pulled into their driveway at 7:15 p.m., the sun starting to sink low enough to cast long shadows across their perfectly manicured lawn. Before I even turned off the engine, I could hear children's laughter coming from inside. But something about that sound felt off. Fractured. Like there were 2 separate groups laughing at different things in different rooms. I grabbed my work bag and walked up the front path, fishing out the key they'd given me 6 years ago. Addison had presented it during a Sunday dinner shortly after the wedding, making a whole ceremony out of it. She'd held it up in front of everyone and announced that I was officially part of the family now. That this key symbolized my place in their home and their hearts. Wyatt had gotten emotional, Peyton had hugged me, Roger had raised his glass in a toast. I'd cried actual tears of gratitude that day because it felt like proof that I finally belonged somewhere again. Now, that key felt heavy in my hand as I slid it into the lock. The front door opened directly into their living room, but the noise was coming from deeper in the house, from the kitchen and dining area. I stepped inside and immediately noticed the smell of Italian food, rich tomato sauce, garlic, fresh bread. My stomach growled because I'd skipped lunch, and I thought maybe Addison had made enough for me, too. That this was one of those rare moments when she'd actually been thinking about my needs instead of just her own. I followed the sound of voices and laughter, my work heels clicking on their hardwood floors. The hallway opened into a large, combined kitchen and dining space, and that's when I saw it. The scene that would replay in my nightmares with perfect, terrible clarity. Peyton's children sat at the formal mahogany dining table, like they were attending some kind of celebration. Harper, 10, had her napkin tucked into her shirt properly while she worked through what looked like a third helping of lasagna. Liam, 8, nearly the same age as Mia, was laughing at something his mother had said while reaching for another piece of garlic bread from the basket in the center of the table. Their plates were piled high with food. Real plates, the nice ones with the floral pattern that Addison usually reserved for holidays. Crystal glasses full of lemonade sat beside each plate. Cloth napkins, not paper. My children sat on bar stools at the kitchen counter, 15 feet away. Their plates were completely empty. Not even crumbs. Just white ceramic surfaces that might as well have been mirrors reflecting back their worthlessness. Mia and Evan weren't laughing. They sat perfectly still, hands folded in their laps, watching their cousins eat the way you'd watch something on television, something you weren't part of, and never would be. The physical segregation was so deliberate, so stark, that my brain couldn't immediately process what I was seeing. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't poor planning or bad timing. This was intentional. Addison stood at the dining table, her back to my children, serving Harper another generous portion of lasagna directly from a serving dish. She was smiling, chatting with Peyton, who sat at the table scrolling through her phone with one hand while absently sipping her lemonade with the other. Roger occupied his usual recliner in the adjoining living room, his own plate balanced on his lap while he watched the evening news. Nobody had noticed me yet. I was standing in the doorway, watching this domestic scene play out like some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "Oh, Leah, perfect timing!" Addison said when she finally glanced up and saw me. She didn't look embarrassed. Didn't look guilty. She looked mildly pleased, like I'd arrived at a convenient moment. "We just finished dinner." Finished. As if my children had participated in a meal instead of sitting there watching other people eat. I couldn't speak yet. My throat had closed up with a rage so cold it felt like ice spreading through my chest. Instead, I walked over to where Mia and Evan sat and knelt down to their eye level, forcing my voice to sound calm and normal. "Hey, babies, how was your day?" "Good," Mia said. Her voice had that careful, neutral tone she used when she was trying not to upset anyone, trying not to cause problems. At 9 years old, my daughter had already learned to make herself smaller, to minimize her needs and feelings so other people would be comfortable. When had that happened? When had I let that happen? "Did you guys have fun playing together?" I asked, glancing between my kids and their cousins. Evan shook his head, and I thanked God for Evan's honesty, because he hadn't learned yet how to lie to protect other people's feelings. "They played different games," he said quietly. I looked around the room again, really seeing it this time. The way my children had positioned themselves at the edge of everything, perched on bar stools like visitors instead of family. The way Peyton's kids sprawled comfortably across the dining space like they owned it. The way nobody at that table seemed to think anything was wrong with this picture. "What did everyone have for dinner?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was going to destroy me. "Grammy made lasagna," Harper announced proudly from the dining table. "It's really good. She makes the best lasagna." I looked at my daughter. "And what did you two have?" Mia hesitated, glancing toward Addison before answering. That glance told me everything I needed to know about the power dynamics in this house, about who my daughter had learned to defer to. "We weren't that hungry," she finally said. But I knew Mia. I knew she was always hungry after camp, always asking what was for dinner the second I picked her up. I knew she never turned down her grandmother's cooking, because Addison made the kind of comfort food my daughter loved. "Actually, there wasn't quite enough for everyone," Addison interjected smoothly, like she was explaining something perfectly reasonable. "So, I made them grilled cheese earlier. They were fine with it. Children don't need full meals every single time they're here." I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where a large glass lasagna pan sat, with at least 6 generous servings still remaining. Enough to feed my children twice over. Enough to make it clear that Addison's explanation was a lie. And she didn't even care that I could see the evidence sitting right there. "I think I'll make them plates now," I said, reaching for the serving spoon. "Leah, honestly, they're fine," Addison said, and now there was an edge in her voice. "Children don't need full meals every single time they're here. They already ate. But Harper and Liam seem to need full meals," I observed quietly, looking at the overflowing plates at the dining table. "They seem to need second and third helpings." The room went silent, except for the television in the background. Even Roger's chewing slowed as he picked up on the tension. "My daughter's children have different nutritional needs," Addison said. The casualness of her cruelty took my breath away. "Her kids can wait for scraps if there's not enough to go around. That's just how it works in blended families." Blended families. Like the problem was family structure instead of deliberate exclusion. Like she was explaining basic mathematics instead of teaching my children they didn't deserve to eat. I started serving lasagna onto 2 clean plates anyway, my hands shaking with fury I was barely containing. Behind me, I heard Peyton's chair scrape against the floor. I heard her footsteps approaching, and then I heard her voice, directed at my children, not at me. "You two are sweet kids," she said, and when I turned around, she was smiling. "But you should know your place in this family. My children come first. That's just how it is." Mia's fork, which she'd picked up in anticipation of finally eating, stopped halfway to the plate I was preparing. Evan's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to let fall. Roger's voice came from the living room, agreeable and matter-of-fact. Best they learn it young. I looked at my children's faces as they absorbed this lesson. This lesson about their worth, about how their own family saw them as lesser beings who didn't deserve basic dignity or kindness. Something inside me snapped clean in half. "Come on, kids," I said quietly. "Get your things. We're leaving." "Leah, don't be dramatic," Addison called after me, but I was already helping Mia down from her bar stool. "We can talk about this." I didn't respond. I just put the plates of lasagna I'd been preparing into the microwave and set it for 2 minutes. Because my children were going to eat. They were going to eat properly, sitting down, taking their time, not rushed out the door like I was ashamed of feeding them in this house. "Talk about what?" I finally said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. "About how you think my children should accept being second-class family members? About how you think it's appropriate to feed them scraps while their cousins feast?" The microwave beeped. I pulled out the plates, tested the temperature with my finger, and set them in front of Mia and Evan. Their faces transformed when they saw the food. Real food. The same food their cousins had been enjoying. That joy shouldn't have broken my heart, but it did. They shouldn't have been this grateful for basic decency. "You're twisting everything," Roger said from his recliner, finally setting down his own plate. "We love those kids." I looked at him directly for the first time. "Do you? When's the last time you came to one of Evan's baseball games?" Silence. "When's the last time you asked Mia about her science fair project? She won second place in her grade, by the way. Built a model of the solar system that lit up when you pressed buttons for each planet." More silence. "When's the last time either of you treated them like they actually belonged here?" While my children ate, I pulled out one of the other bar stools and sat down beside them, watching their faces as they focused on their food with an intensity that made my chest ache. They were eating like they were afraid someone might take it away. 7 and 9 years old, and they'd already learned not to take anything for granted in this house. "So, what did you guys do all day?" I asked gently, keeping my voice light, even though I could feel Addison's eyes boring into the back of my head. "Watch TV mostly," Evan said between bites. "Any good shows?" He shrugged. "The ones for little kids. Did you play any games? It's such a beautiful day outside." The question hung in the air for a moment before Mia answered, her eyes still on her plate. "Harper and Liam went to the park with Grammy." "That sounds fun. Did you go too?" Silence. The kind that speaks entire volumes. "Why didn't you go to the park, baby?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was going to gut me. "Grammy said she could only take 2 kids safely," Mia explained with a matter-of-factness that shattered something inside me. "And Harper and Liam asked first, so they got to go." Asked first? As if my children's grandmother operated on a first-come, first-served basis instead of treating all her grandchildren equally. As if taking 4 kids to a public park was somehow more dangerous than taking 2. "How long were they gone?" I asked. "I don't know. We watched 3 episodes of cartoons. An hour and a half, minimum." My children had sat inside watching television meant for toddlers while their grandmother took their cousins to the park on a perfect summer afternoon. And nobody had thought there was anything wrong with that picture. I looked over at Addison, who was suddenly very interested in wiping down the already clean dining table. "You couldn't take all 4 kids to the park? It's a safety issue, Leah," she said without looking at me. "I can only watch so many children at once, and Harper and Liam are more familiar with the park rules. They know how to stay close and listen. I didn't want to risk what?" I cut her off. "Risk my children existing in the same space as their cousins? Risk treating them like they matter? That's not what I said. It's what you meant." Peyton, who'd been quiet since I started heating up the lasagna, suddenly set down her phone. "Actually, Leah, since you're here, I should mention we're going to be pretty busy the next few weekends. Summer's full of activities. The shift in topic was so abrupt, it took me a second to catch up. What kind of activities? Oh, you know. Community pool parties, neighborhood barbecues, the annual family reunion on my mom's side. She said it casually, like she was just making conversation, but I caught the deliberate exclusion in her words. That sounds wonderful! The kids would love all of that, especially the pool parties. Mia's been practicing her diving all summer. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Well, Peyton said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. These are kind of specific events, not really appropriate for everyone. What does that mean? Roger cleared his throat from the living room. What Peyton means is that some of these events are specifically for blood family. Keeps things simple, you understand? Traditions and all that. Blood family. There was the phrase that reduced my children to outsiders in their own family tree. I see, I said, though I was only beginning to see the full architecture of their exclusion. And you think it's appropriate to teach my children that they're not real family? That they don't deserve the same experiences as their cousins? We're not saying they're not real family, Addison protested, finally looking at me directly. We're just being realistic about social dynamics. Your kids need to understand that Peyton's children will always have certain privileges because they carry our bloodline. It's natural. It's biological. Natural. She was using science words to justify cruelty, as if genetics was a reasonable excuse for treating children differently. So, at the pool party, I said slowly, when Harper and Liam are swimming and playing with their cousins and friends, where exactly do you expect my children to be? Nobody answered. At the family reunion, when everyone's taking photos and sharing stories about family history, do Mia and Evan just stand in the corner? Do they wait outside? You're being deliberately obtuse, Peyton said, irritation creeping into her voice. Nobody said they'd be excluded from everything. We're just saying that some events are more appropriate for our side of the family. The biological side. I looked around that dining room, really seeing it for the first time. The portraits on the walls were all of Peyton's children. Birthday photos, school pictures, candid shots of Harper and Liam at various ages. There wasn't a single photograph of Mia or Evan displayed anywhere in this house. Not one. Let me ask you something else, I said, standing up from the bar stool. When's the last time any of you came to Evan's baseball games? He plays every Saturday morning, has for the past 2 seasons. Silence. When's the last time you asked Mia about school? About her friends? About the science fair she spent 6 weeks preparing for? Roger shifted uncomfortably in his recliner. We ask about school. When? When's the last time you called? Just to talk to them? Not to ask me for money? The question landed like a physical blow. I could see it in their faces, the realization that I'd connected the dots they thought I was too blind to see. That's not fair, Addison said weakly. Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your relationship with my children has always been secondary to your relationship with my bank account. You remember to call when Roger needed a new truck. You remember to call when Peyton needed a lawyer. You remember to call when the roof needed repairs. But you've never once remembered to call on Mia's birthday. Not once in 9 years. We send cards, Peyton protested. You send cards that I know for a fact your mother buys in bulk at the grocery store, because I found the receipt on the counter last Christmas. Generic birthday cards with $20 tucked inside. The same cards you send to your hairdresser and your mail carrier. Mia had stopped eating. Both my children were staring at their plates now, absorbing this conversation about their worth, learning in real time how little they meant to the people who were supposed to love them unconditionally. Come on, kids, I said quietly. Get your things. We're leaving. Leah, please. Addison started, taking a step toward me. Let's not do this in front of the children. You should have thought about that before you did it in front of the children, I said. Before you made them watch their cousins eat while they went hungry. Before you taught them that they're not worth the same effort, the same love, the same basic decency as Harper and Liam. I helped Mia and Evan gather their backpacks and water bottles, moving mechanically while my mind raced ahead to what came next. What had to come next? At the door, I turned back one last time. We'll talk again soon. When you're ready to be honest about whether you actually love my children, or just my money. The flash of panic across Addison's face told me everything I needed to know. For the first time in 6 years, she was realizing that her cash flow might be in jeopardy, that the ATM she'd been relying on might finally be closing for business. I walked my children to the car in silence, buckled them into their seats, and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. In the rearview mirror, I could see both kids staring out their windows, their faces carefully blank in that way children learn when they're trying not to cry. And that's when I knew exactly what I had to do. I turned the key in the ignition, but didn't put the car in drive. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. The silence in the car felt heavy, oppressive, like it had physical weight pressing down on all three of us. I should have said something comforting. Something that would make this better. But my throat had closed up, and I couldn't find words that wouldn't be lies. Finally, I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. The house sat there in my rearview mirror, warm light glowing from the windows, looking exactly like the kind of home where families gathered and children were loved. The illusion was perfect from the outside. We made it 3 blocks before Mia spoke. "Mom?" Her voice was so small, I almost didn't hear it over the sound of the engine. "Why don't Grammy and Pop like us as much as Harper and Liam?" The question landed in my chest like a stone dropping into still water, sending ripples of pain through everything I thought I understood about our lives. I opened my mouth to give her the answer a mother is supposed to give, the comforting lie about how of course they love you equally, how you're imagining things, how family is complicated but love is simple. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't lie to her anymore. "They should love you exactly the same, baby," I said instead, my voice shaking. "Grandparents are supposed to love all their grandchildren equally." "But they don't," Evan said, flat and factual, in the way only a 7-year-old can be. "We're not blood family," Aunt Peyton said. So, I had to pull over. I couldn't see the road anymore through the tears that had started without my permission. I guided the car to the curb in front of a darkened park and put it in park, pressing my palms against my eyes like I could physically hold back the crying. My 7-year-old son had just articulated his own perceived worthlessness. And he'd done it in the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. Like it was just a fact of life he'd accepted. Like he'd already learned his place in this world. "Listen to me," I said, turning around in my seat to look at both of them directly. "What Aunt Peyton said is cruel and wrong. You are family. You are their grandchildren. And if they can't see how special and valuable and wonderful you are, that's their failure, not yours. Do you understand me?" Mia nodded, but her eyes were full of doubt. Evan just stared at his hands. "How long has this been happening?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "How long have they been treating you differently when I'm not there?" The kids exchanged a glance, that sibling communication that happens without words. "Always," Mia finally said. "But we thought maybe we were being too sensitive. Like maybe we were imagining it. Always." The word echoed in my head while I turned back around and stared at the dark park through the windshield. Always meant this wasn't new. Always meant every time I dropped them off for babysitting, every Sunday dinner, every holiday gathering, this had been happening. And I'd been too blind to see it. Or maybe I'd been too afraid to see it, because seeing it would have meant choosing between my children and the family I'd worked so hard to belong to. My mind started racing backward through 6 years of memories, re-examining them through this new lens. Mia's 6th birthday party, where Addison and Roger had brought Harper and Liam elaborate presents, remote control cars and American Girl dolls, while Mia got a $20 gift card to Target. I told myself they were on a budget, that handmade gifts were more meaningful anyway, that Mia didn't need material things to know she was loved. Christmas 2 years ago, when Addison's living room had been covered in framed photos of Harper and Liam at various ages, professional portraits and candid shots, a whole wall dedicated to Peyton's children. When I'd asked where the photos of Mia and Evan were, Addison had said she was waiting to get good ones printed. That the lighting in the ones I'd sent wasn't quite right. I'd believed her. I'd actually believed her. The beach house vacation that we weren't invited to because of limited space. Roger had explained they could only fit one family comfortably. And since Peyton was recently divorced and struggling, she needed it more. But the beach house had 4 bedrooms. I'd seen photos. There had been plenty of space. They just hadn't wanted us there. Every small cruelty had been there all along, building a foundation of exclusion brick by brick. I'd been too busy writing checks to notice the structure they were constructing around my children. I pulled back onto the road and continued driving home, my mind still cataloging incidents I'd dismissed as misunderstandings. The Christmas pageant where Addison and Roger had sat in the front row cheering for Harper, but claimed they'd gotten the time wrong for Evan's performance. The science fair, where they'd promised to come see Mia's project but never showed up because of a last-minute conflict they couldn't avoid. The baseball games, the school concerts, the awards ceremonies, all the moments where my children had scanned the audience, looking for their grandparents, and found empty seats instead. When we pulled into our driveway, I could see Wyatt moving around in the kitchen through the window. Normal Tuesday evening. Making dinner. Probably assuming we'd all walk in with stories about our day and everything would be fine. Everything was not fine. The kids went straight upstairs without being asked, and I knew they wanted space to process what had happened without adults watching them. I stood in the entryway for a moment, trying to compose myself before facing my husband. But my face must have given me away immediately. "What happened?" Wyatt asked when I walked into the kitchen. His tone was already defensive, already bracing for criticism of his family. I told him. I told him everything. Every word his mother had said, every cruelty his sister had inflicted, every moment of our children sitting with empty plates while their cousins feasted. I watched his face cycle through shock and discomfort, and then settle into something that looked like resignation. And that expression told me he'd known. Maybe not the specific incidents, but the overall pattern. He'd known, and chosen not to see it. "They probably didn't mean it the way it sounded," he said. And those words, coming out of his mouth, felt like betrayal. "You know how Mom is. She says things without thinking them through. She told our children they should wait for scraps, Wyatt. She said it was normal for blood family to eat first. Your sister told them they need to know their place. What part of that could I possibly be misunderstanding?" He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from every difficult conversation we'd ever had. "I'm sure there's context you're missing. Family dynamics are complicated." "Stop," I said, my voice sharp enough that he actually took a step back. "Stop defending them. Stop making excuses. Your family humiliated our children today. And instead of being angry about it, you're telling me I'm overreacting? I'm not saying you're overreacting. I'm saying maybe we should talk to them before jumping to conclusions. I heard what they said, Wyatt. I saw what they did. There are no conclusions to jump to. This happened." He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him struggling with something. Some internal battle between the son who'd been raised to never question his mother and the father who was supposed to protect his children. "They've always been good to us," he finally said, and the weakness in that argument made me want to scream. "Have they? When Mia was in the hospital with pneumonia, where was your mother? When I had a miscarriage and could barely get out of bed, did your sister bring over a single meal? When we begged them to babysit so we could save our marriage with a weekend away, did any of them make time? That's different." "How? How is it different?" "They had commitments. They have lives. They can't drop everything just because we need help. But we can drop everything when they need money," I said quietly. "We can drop everything when your mother needs a new roof, or your father needs a new truck, or your sister needs a lawyer. Funny how that works." I walked past him to the home office and opened my laptop, pulling up our bank account with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Wyatt followed me, hovering in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Something I should have done years ago," I said. I'm calculating exactly how much money we've given your family. Leah, that's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary. I need to know. I need to see the number. I need to understand what I've been funding all this time while they've been systematically excluding our children from their own family. The spreadsheets started coming together. Each transaction a small wound that added up to something catastrophic. 3,000 here, 5,000 there, 15,000 for the roof, 12,000 for legal fees, 8,000 for medical bills. The numbers climbed higher and higher while Wyatt stood in the doorway watching me work, his face growing paler with each entry. When I finally reached the total, I stared at it for a long moment, not quite believing what I was seeing. $134,000. Over 6 years, I had given Wyatt's family $134,000. And in return, they taught my children they weren't worth feeding. $134,000. I said out loud, my voice hollow in the quiet office. The numbers sat on my screen in bold, digital certainty, impossible to deny or minimize. Wyatt made a sound like he'd been punched. That can't be right. It's right. I've checked it 3 times. I scrolled back to the top of the spreadsheet, showing him the earliest entries from 6 years ago. This is every bank transfer, every check, every direct payment I've made to your family, or on their behalf. Want me to walk you through it? He didn't answer, just stared at the screen like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less damning. $3,000 for property taxes before we were even married. I continued, my voice taking on a mechanical quality as I recited the list. $5,000 for your dad's medical procedure 3 months after the wedding. $12,000 for Peyton's custody lawyer. $15,000 for the roof. $8,000 for your mom's dental work. $22,000 for your dad's truck because the old one finally died. I didn't realize, Wyatt said weakly. I didn't know it added up to that much. That's the problem, Wyatt. You never asked? You never questioned why every single family emergency became my financial responsibility. You never wondered why your parents, with their paid-off house, and your sister, with her boutique job, couldn't handle their own expenses without my constant support. I kept scrolling through the entries, watching his face grow paler with each line item. Emergency dental work that insurance supposedly didn't cover. Property tax increases that happened with suspicious regularity. Car repairs that always seemed to coincide with my quarterly bonuses. Medical bills, home repairs, legal fees, utility assistance during tight months that never seemed to end. Some of these were loans, Wyatt said, grasping at the weakest defense available. They were going to pay us back. Were they? Show me one. Show me a single loan that's been repaid. Silence. The roof repair was supposed to be temporary help. He tried again. Dad was going to pay us back when his settlement came through. What settlement, Wyatt? There was no settlement. There was never going to be a settlement. That was just another story to make me feel better about writing the check. He sank into the chair across from my desk, his head in his hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him, seeing him confront the reality of what his family had been doing. But then I remembered Mia and Evan sitting on those bar stools with empty plates, and the sympathy evaporated. They're my parents, he said finally, his voice muffled by his hands. They raised me. They sacrificed for me. I can't just abandon them. I'm not asking you to abandon them. I'm asking you to see what they've been doing to our children. To us. They've been using you, Wyatt. Using your guilt and your sense of obligation to bleed us dry while treating our kids like they're less than human. That's not fair. Your mother told our children they should wait for scraps. I cut him off, my voice rising. Your sister told them they need to know their place. Your father agreed that they should learn young to expect less than their cousins. While we've been paying for their mortgages and their trucks and their lawyers, they've been teaching our babies that they don't deserve basic dignity. How is pointing that out not fair? I heard footsteps on the stairs and immediately lowered my voice. The last thing I needed was for Mia or Evan to hear us fighting about them. A moment later there was a soft knock on the office door. Mom? Mia's voice, small and uncertain. Can I get some water? Of course, baby. I'll come with you. I left Wyatt sitting in the office, staring at the spreadsheet, and went upstairs with Mia. She filled her water bottle at the kitchen sink, taking longer than necessary. And I realized she'd come down because she'd heard us arguing and wanted to make sure I was okay. 9 years old and already trying to take care of me. Are you and Dad fighting about what happened at Grammy's? She asked, not looking at me. I could have lied. Should have lied, probably. But I was so tired of lying to protect other people's feelings. We're having a difficult conversation about it. Yes. Is it our fault? The question shattered what was left of my composure. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight against my chest. No, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. Not one single bit. You and Evan have done nothing wrong. The adults in the situation have made bad choices, and we're trying to figure out how to fix it. Does Dad think we're overreacting too? Like she'd already internalized that her feelings about being excluded and humiliated weren't valid? Like she'd learned to doubt her own perception of cruelty? Dad is learning some things he should have paid attention to a long time ago, I said carefully. It's hard for him because it's his family, and nobody wants to believe their family would do something hurtful on purpose. She nodded against my shoulder, and I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt. After I got her settled back in bed, I stood in the hallway for a long moment, just breathing, trying to find the strength to go back downstairs and finish the conversation I'd started. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Rachel, my best friend since college. How did it go? Call me if you need to talk. I texted her on the drive home, a brief message explaining what had happened. Now I realized I desperately needed to hear a voice that wasn't Wyatt's. Someone who would understand without defending, who would validate what I was feeling instead of telling me I was overreacting. I went into the bedroom and closed the door before calling her. Tell me everything, Rachel said immediately. No preamble, no small talk. So I did. I told her about the empty plates and the full dining table, about Addison's casual cruelty and Peyton's deliberate meanness, about Roger nodding along like this was all perfectly reasonable. I told her about Wyatt's defensive reaction and the spreadsheet showing $134,000 in support for people who couldn't be bothered to love my children. Rachel listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I loved most about her. She didn't try to fix it, or minimize it, or offer platitudes. She just listened until I ran out of words. I'm not surprised, she finally said, and there was sadness in her voice. Leah, I've been watching this pattern for years. I've tried to point it out gently, but you weren't ready to hear it. I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I understand why you couldn't see it. You wanted family so badly after losing your parents. Wyatt's family seemed like everything you'd been missing. But they'd been using that longing against you, using your generosity as a weapon. What do I do? I asked, my voice breaking. How do I fix this? What do you want to do? I thought about it for a moment. Really considered what outcome I was looking for. Did I want an apology? Did I want them to change? Did I want to salvage the relationship somehow? No. What I wanted was for them to understand what they'd lost. What they'd thrown away by treating my children as disposable. I want them to hurt the way they hurt my kids, I said quietly. Is that terrible? It's human, Rachel said. And honestly, it might be necessary. Some people don't learn until they face real consequences. I don't even know where to start. Actually, Rachel said, and I could hear the shift in her tone from friend to paralegal. You might have more options than you think. Didn't you co-sign on their mortgage? Yeah. 3 years ago, when they were refinancing. Their credit was shot from some previous foreclosure. And you've been making payments, substantial ones. The property taxes alone are brutal. What about Roger's truck? You mentioned a loan. I guaranteed it with my credit score. They couldn't get approved on their own. Rachel was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear her legal mind working through possibilities. Leah, do you understand what this means? You're not just giving them money. You're actually legally responsible for their debts, which means you also have the power to remove yourself from those obligations. My heart started beating faster. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you wanted to send a message, a very clear and very powerful message about what happens when you take someone for granted, you have the legal right to stop all support immediately. You can remove yourself as a co-signer on that mortgage. You can withdraw your guarantee on the truck loan. You can stop making any payments you've been making on their behalf. What would happen to them? They'd have to cover those expenses themselves. And given what you've told me about their financial situation, they probably can't. They'd face foreclosure on the house. The truck would get repossessed. They'd have to drastically downsize their lifestyle. I sat with that information, turning it over in my mind. The power I'd had all along without realizing it. The leverage I'd been giving them freely while they used it to hurt my children. How fast could this happen? I asked. If you make the calls tomorrow, the banks would notify them within 48 hours. Foreclosure proceedings take about 90 days, but the panic would start immediately. I thought about 18 minutes. 18 minutes. My children had sat with empty plates, watching their cousins eat. 18 minutes of humiliation and hunger and learning they didn't matter. I need to think about this, I said. Of course. But Leah, whatever you decide, I'm here. If you need legal paperwork, if you need someone to make calls with you, if you just need someone to remind you that you're not crazy for being angry, I'm here. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing. Downstairs, I could hear Wyatt moving around, probably still in the office looking at that spreadsheet. The house was quiet except for the normal settling sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. I pulled up my banking app on my phone and started looking at the recurring payments more carefully. The mortgage assistance that went out on the 1st of every month, the truck payment on the 15th, the mysterious monthly transfer to an account I'd set up years ago that I'd now realized was paying part of Peyton's rent. They'd built their entire comfortable lifestyle on the foundation of my income. Their nice house, their reliable vehicles, their ability to take beach vacations and host elaborate dinners. All of it funded by the daughter-in-law they'd never bothered to value. I stayed up most of that night researching co-signed loans, guarantor obligations, mortgage law. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I understood exactly what I could do and what the consequences would be. By 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd made my decision. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Wyatt's breathing beside me, running through scenarios and consequences in my mind. By the time dawn broke through our bedroom curtains, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Wyatt left early for summer school classes, kissing my forehead without meeting my eyes. We hadn't resolved anything from the night before. The spreadsheet still sat open on my laptop downstairs, $134,000 in damning evidence either of us could ignore. I got the kids ready for camp with mechanical efficiency, packing lunches and sunscreen while they moved around me with unusual quietness. They knew something was wrong. Could feel the tension radiating off me like heat from pavement. Mom, Mia asked as I buckled her seat belt. Are we ever going to see Grammy and Pop again? The question lodged in my throat like a physical object. I had to take a breath before I could answer. I don't know yet, sweetheart. We need some time to figure things out. Did we do something wrong? Her voice cracked on the last word, and I had to grip the car door to keep myself steady. No, you did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you hear me? She nodded. But I could see the doubt in her eyes. Children always blame themselves. It's hardwired into them somehow. This belief that adult cruelty must be their fault. I made it 3 blocks from our house before I had to pull over. The tears came so suddenly, I couldn't see the road anymore. I gripped the steering wheel and tried to breathe through the sobs while my children sat silently in the back seat, probably terrified by seeing their mother fall apart. I'm sorry, I managed to say. I'm so sorry you had to experience what happened yesterday. You deserve better. You deserve so much better than how they treated you. It's okay, Mom. Evan said quietly from the back seat. We're used to it. Used to it. My 7-year-old son was used to being treated as less than human by his own family. How had I let this happen? How had I been so blind? Are we going to be okay? Evan asked, and something in his tone made me look at him in the rearview mirror. Without Graham's help, I mean, are we going to be okay? The question revealed how much he'd absorbed about our family dynamics. He'd been paying attention to things I thought children didn't notice. The constant requests for money, the way we rearrange our lives around his grandparents' needs, the unspoken understanding that Grammy and Pop required our support to survive. We're going to be more than okay, I told him, wiping my eyes and pulling back onto the road. I promise you that. After I dropped them at camp, I sat in the parking lot with my phone in my hand. My accountant's number was already pulled up. All I had to do was press call. But once I started this, there was no going back. Once I dismantled their financial security, we would be at war. I pressed call. My accountant, Margaret, answered on the second ring. I'd prepared her yesterday with a brief overview of what I needed, so she was ready. I want to move forward, I said, with everything we discussed. You're sure about this, Leah? Once we start the process, it's going to move quickly. I'm sure. All right. Let me pull up your file. The mortgage first. You're listed as co-signer on the property at 847 Maple Grove Drive. Correct? Correct. I'll contact the bank this morning and initiate removal of you as co-signer. They'll need to refinance without your income and credit, which, given what you've told me about their financial situation, they likely can't do. They'll have 90 days to either refinance, find another co-signer, or pay off the mortgage in full. If they can't do any of those things, the foreclosure process begins. How quickly will they be notified? The bank will contact them within 24 to 48 hours. Next, I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia, who Rachel had connected me with. She'd already reviewed the documentation I'd sent regarding the truck loan and Peyton's rental situation. The truck loan is straightforward, Patricia explained. You guaranteed it with your credit, but you can withdraw that guarantee with written notice. The dealership will contact the primary borrower, Roger, and require him to refinance without your backing within 30 days, or they'll repossess the vehicle. And Peyton's rent? That's even simpler. You've been making supplemental payments directly to her landlord. You can stop those immediately. No legal process required. Just stop paying. Will the landlord notify her when her next rent payment is short? Absolutely. Probably within the week. I sat in my car after those calls were made, watching other parents drop their children off at camp. Normal people living normal lives, not calculating revenge against family members who treated their children like garbage. But I wasn't going to feel guilty. Not this time. I drove home and spent the day working from my home office, responding to emails and sitting through video conferences while my mind was somewhere else entirely. I kept checking the time, obsessively, watching the minutes tick by. I decided something during my sleepless night. I was going to time this perfectly. 18 minutes. That's how long Mia and Evan had sat with empty plates, watching their cousins eat. 18 minutes of hunger and humiliation and learning they didn't matter. At 7:02 that evening, I made the first call. The mortgage bank had already processed my paperwork. All I had to do was verbally confirm my intention to remove myself as co-signer, and it became official. The representative on the phone was professional and impersonal as she explained that the primary borrowers would be notified by mail and phone within 24 hours. Second call, the truck dealership. Same process, same efficiency. Roger would receive notification that he needed to refinance the loan without my guarantee within 30 days. Third call, Peyton's landlord, a man named Frank, who I'd been sending checks to for over 2 years. I'm calling to inform you that I'll no longer be making supplemental rent payments for Unit 3B. This is effective immediately. The tenant is going to be short on rent then, Frank said, sounding annoyed. She can't afford the full amount on her own. That's between you and her. My obligation ends today. I hung up and looked at the clock. 7:27 p.m. 3 phone calls in 2 minutes. Everything was done. Now I waited. Wyatt came home around 7:30 p.m., still walking on eggshells around me. He heated up leftovers and ate in silence while I sat at the kitchen table with my phone face down in front of me. "Did you do something?" he asked quietly. "I protected our children." "Leah, what did you do?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Addison. I checked the time. 7:43 p.m. Exactly 18 minutes after I'd made my calls. I answered on speaker so Wyatt could hear. "Leah, honey, something's wrong with the mortgage payment." Her voice was trembling, verging on panic. "The bank called and said you removed yourself as co-signer." "That can't be right. There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Addison. I removed myself from your mortgage and stopped all payments." "You can't do that. We'll lose the house." "Then I suggest you figure out how to make the payments yourselves. You have 90 days before foreclosure proceedings begin." "Leah, please. We can work this out." "Can we?" "Because yesterday you told my children they should wait for scraps while your daughter's children ate first. You told them to know their place. So now you're going to learn yours." I ended the call. Wyatt stared at me, his face pale. "What did you just do?" "I took away everything I've been giving them. The mortgage, the truck loan, Peyton's rent. All of it stops today. They're going to lose everything." "Good." My phone rang again. "Roger." This time I let it go to voicemail and moments later heard his angry voice leaving a message about how I was destroying the family, how I had no right, how he was going to make me fix this. 12 minutes after the first call, my phone rang a third time. "Peyton." Sobbing before I even said hello. "You told Frank to stop paying my rent." "Leah, I can't afford my apartment without that help. I'm going to get evicted." "Then I suggest you ask your mother for help," I said calmly. "Oh, wait. She's about to lose her house because I stopped subsidizing her lifestyle, too." "You vindictive. Be very careful what you say next, Peyton, because I've also notified your custody lawyer that I won't be covering any more of your legal fees. I believe you still owe them about $8,000. I'm sure they'll be very interested in immediate payment." The line went dead. 17 minutes after the first call. I looked at Wyatt, who was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "I timed it," I said. 18 minutes. The exact amount of time our children sat with empty plates, watching their cousins eat. Every phone call, every moment of panic they're experiencing right now, it matches what they did to Mia and Evan. Minute by minute. "Leah, they're going to lose everything they have." "Yes," I said. "They are." Wyatt's phone started ringing at 6 o'clock the next morning. His mother. He looked at the screen, looked at me, and declined the call. It rang again 30 seconds later, and again, and again. By the time we sat down for breakfast, he had 14 missed calls from various members of his family. I had 9. The barrage had begun. The first voicemail from Addison started with tears. "Leah, honey, please call me back. There's been a terrible misunderstanding with the bank. They're saying we're going to lose the house. Please, we need to fix this. Call me." The second voicemail, left an hour later, had a different tone. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this isn't funny. You can't just destroy our lives because you're upset about a little disagreement. We're family. Call me back right now." The third voicemail was pure rage. "How dare you do this to us after everything we've done for you? We welcomed you into this family with open arms. We treated you like a daughter, and this is how you repay us? By taking away our home? You're a spiteful, vindictive woman, and Wyatt deserves better." I listened to each one with Wyatt sitting across the table, watching my face for a reaction. I kept my expression neutral, clinical, like I was reviewing data from a work project. "She's spiraling," I said calmly. "Leah, maybe we should." "Should what? Give them another chance to tell our children they're not good enough? Write another check so they can continue treating us like an ATM with a pulse?" He didn't have an answer for that. By mid-morning, Roger had sent 6 text messages, each one escalating in aggression. The last one threatened legal action, claiming I'd entered into a binding agreement to support them and couldn't just walk away without consequences. That's when I forwarded the entire thread to Patricia, my lawyer. She called me back within 20 minutes. "Your father-in-law is bluffing," she said. "There's no binding agreement. Every payment you made was voluntary. I'm sending him a cease and desist letter right now explaining that any further harassment will result in a restraining order." "Thank you. Leah, be prepared," she added. "This is going to get worse before it gets better. People who've been financially dependent on someone else don't give up easily. They're going to try everything to get you to resume payments." She was right. On day 2, Peyton showed up at my office building. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked on the conference room door, her face apologetic and uncomfortable. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman in the lobby demanding to see you. Security is dealing with it, but she's claiming it's a family emergency." I excused myself and took the elevator down, already knowing who I'd find there. Peyton stood near the security desk, her face blotchy from crying, her voice loud enough to draw attention from everyone passing through. "You can't do this to me," she was saying to the security guard, who looked deeply uncomfortable. "My children are going to be homeless because of her." "Ma'am, you need to leave the building," the guard said firmly. "Not until she talks to me." I approached slowly, keeping my distance. "Peyton." She whirled around, and I saw genuine panic in her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Leah, please! Frank is going to evict me. I can't afford the full rent on my own. Harper and Liam need stability. You can't do this to my children. You did this to your children when you decided mine weren't worth basic decency. That's not what happened. You told my kids they should know their place," I said quietly, aware of the audience we'd attracted. "You said your children come first? Well, now my children come first. You'll figure it out, Peyton. The same way millions of single mothers figure it out without someone else paying their bills. I'll lose custody. Don't you understand? If I can't provide stable housing, Jeremy's lawyer will use it against me. You're going to help him take my children." That hit differently than I expected. For a split second, I wavered, thinking about Harper and Liam and how none of this was their fault. But then I remembered Mia and Evan sitting on those bar stools with empty plates, and the sympathy evaporated. "Then maybe you should have thought about consequences before you treated my children like they were disposable." Security escorted her out while she screamed about how I was destroying her life. I went back upstairs, sat through the rest of my meeting, and didn't let myself think about what had just happened until I got home that evening. What I didn't expect was the call from Wyatt's aunt, Linda. I'd met Linda exactly 3 times, all at major family events. She lived in Oregon and wasn't particularly close with Addison or Roger, but she was Roger's sister and apparently had been more involved in their lives than I'd realized. "Leah, this is Linda Harper. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I need to understand what's happening with Roger and Addison." "What did they tell you?" I asked carefully. "Addison called me yesterday asking for money. She said you'd cut them off financially and they were about to lose everything. She said you'd always been controlling with money, that you held it over their heads, and now you were punishing them over some minor disagreement about the grandkids." The lies were so breathtaking, I actually laughed. "Is that what she said? She made it sound like you'd been financially abusive for years. Said she'd been reaching out to family because she didn't know how else to survive. She's been telling me this for about 3 years now. Actually, I've been sending them money every month because I thought they were being mistreated." 3 years. Addison had been running a side operation with extended family, telling them I was the villain while I was actively funding her entire lifestyle. "Linda, would you be willing to listen to my side of this? That's why I'm calling." I sent her everything. The spreadsheet showing $134,000 in payments. Bank statements proving I'd been making their mortgage payments. The timeline showing how every request coincided with my bonuses. And then I sent her the recording I'd made on my phone at dinner, where you could clearly hear Addison talking about my children waiting for scraps. Linda called me back an hour later, and I could hear the anger in her voice. I've been sending them $1,500 a month for 3 years based on complete lies. She told me you were withholding money while living extravagantly. She made you sound like a monster. I'm sorry she put you in that position. Don't apologize. I'm furious with her, not you. I just called Roger and told him exactly what I think of him and his wife. I won't be sending another dollar. Over the next few days, I got similar calls from Wyatt's Uncle Marcus, 2 cousins I'd barely met, and even Addison's own sister, who'd apparently been contributing to what she thought was a desperate situation. Each one had been told some version of the same story. I was wealthy and controlling, refusing to help while Wyatt's parents struggled. The web of lies was more extensive than I'd imagined, and watching it unravel gave me a cold satisfaction I wasn't entirely proud of, but couldn't deny. Wyatt was caught in the middle of all of it. His phone never stopped ringing. His mother called, sobbing about losing the house. His father left voicemails calling me names I won't repeat. His sister sent him essays via text about how I was vindictive and cruel, how I was deliberately destroying her life and her children's stability. I watched him struggle with it, torn between the loyalty he'd been raised to feel and the growing realization that I'd been right about his family all along. One night, about a week after I'd made those phone calls, he was in the bedroom talking to his mother. I could hear it from the hallway where I'd paused on my way to check on the kids. His voice was strained, exhausted. "Mom, I can't keep having this conversation. No, I'm not going to make her change her mind because you told her children they should wait for scraps. You told them they needed to know their place." There was a long pause where I could hear Addison's voice through the phone, high-pitched and defensive. "I don't care if that's not how you meant it," Wyatt continued, and I heard something crack in his voice. "That's what you said? That's what Mia and Evan heard. Do you have any idea what that did to them?" I backed away from the door, not wanting to eavesdrop anymore, but I'd heard enough. Something was shifting in him, finally. When he came downstairs 20 minutes later, his eyes were red. "I told her I need space," he said. "I can't be in the middle of this anymore. I can't keep defending them when I know what they did was wrong." It was the first time since this started that he'd acknowledged their behavior without qualifying it, without making excuses. "That must have been hard," I said. "It was. But you know what was harder? Mia asked me earlier if Grammy was mad because we stopped giving her money." My heart dropped. "She what?" She heard me on the phone. She connected all the dots. "Leah, she understands that Grammy and Pop-Pop's love was conditional on our financial support." "What?" 9-year-old should have to understand that. He sat down heavily at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. "I've been so stupid. You tried to tell me for years that something was off, and I kept defending them. I kept telling you that you were misunderstanding, that you were being too sensitive. And all this time, our kids were watching and learning that love is something you have to purchase. You didn't see it because you didn't want to," I said gently. "They're your parents. Nobody wants to believe their family would treat them that way. But they did. They used us. They used you specifically because you lost your parents and were desperate for family. They saw that vulnerability and exploited it for 6 years. And I let them. The admission hung between us. Painful and necessary." "What do we do now?" he asked. I sat down across from him. "Now we protect our children. We teach them that they don't have to accept less than they deserve from anyone, including family members who are supposed to love them unconditionally." He nodded slowly. "Even if it means my parents lose their house. Especially if it means that. Because maybe losing everything they built on our backs will teach them something about consequences and respect." For the first time since this nightmare started, Wyatt reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have protected you and the kids years ago. I should have seen what they were doing." "You see it now," I said. "That's what matters. We sat at that kitchen table holding hands for a long time, not saying anything, just existing in the quiet acknowledgement that we were finally on the same side. It was the first moment of peace I'd felt since walking into that dining room and seeing my children with empty plates. The next 3 months unfolded exactly as my lawyer and accountant had predicted. Addison and Roger couldn't refinance the mortgage without my income and credit score. Their bank account couldn't sustain the monthly payments. The foreclosure proceedings began right on schedule. Clinical and impersonal. Just business. I heard about it through Wyatt, who still received updates from his mother, though he'd stopped taking her calls daily. They'd found a small 2-bedroom apartment across town above a laundromat in a neighborhood they'd once described as not their kind of area. They'd had to sell most of their furniture just to cover the moving costs and first month's rent. Roger's truck was repossessed in week 7. I heard he tried to hide it at a friend's house, but the repo company had tracking technology. Now he took the bus to his part-time job at the hardware store, something he'd apparently complained about bitterly to anyone who would listen. Peyton had found a roommate through some online service, a college student who needed cheap rent. She'd picked up a second job waitressing 3 nights a week on top of her boutique hours. Her Instagram, which I'd stopped following but occasionally checked out of morbid curiosity, had gone from curated lifestyle shots to nothing at all. I waited for the satisfaction to come. The vindictive pleasure I'd imagined I'd feel watching their comfortable lifestyle collapse. But it never arrived. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not guilt. Not regret. Just a vast emptiness where my relationship with Wyatt's family used to exist. What I didn't expect was the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, for months after I'd made those phone calls. Handwritten address, no return label, but I recognized Addison's careful cursive immediately. I held it for a long time before opening it, not sure I wanted to read whatever justification or accusation it contained. The letter was 3 pages long, written on simple line paper, not the expensive stationery she used to use for thank you notes. Dear Leah. It began. No, sweetheart, no, honey. Just my name. I've started this letter 17 times. Each time I wrote something, then crumpled it up because it wasn't honest enough, or it was making excuses, or it was trying to minimize what we did. I'm going to try one more time to just tell you the truth. You were right about all of it. We treated your children poorly. We prioritized Peyton's kids over Mia and Evan in ways that were cruel and deliberate. We made them feel less than. And we did it consciously, telling ourselves we had good reasons, but knowing deep down that we didn't. I told myself it was about blood, about biology, about maintaining family traditions. But the truth is simpler and uglier than that. I was jealous of you. You had the education I never got, the career I never pursued, the financial independence I never achieved. You represented everything I'd given up or never had the courage to chase. And instead of being proud of my son for finding someone so accomplished, I resented you for it. Peyton was my do-over, my second chance. I poured everything into her kids that I felt I'd missed with my own children. And when you came along with your success and your money and your confidence, I saw you as competition instead of family. So I took your money, and I let you believe it made you belong. But I never really let you in. I never really accepted that your children were as much my grandchildren as Peyton's. I kept you at arm's length while bleeding you dry. And I told myself I was doing it for family, when really I was just being spiteful and small. Losing the house, losing our comfortable life. It forced me to look at what we'd done. Roger and I are living in a 2-bedroom apartment that costs more per month than our mortgage did, and we're barely making it. Peyton is working herself to exhaustion just to keep her kids housed. And we did this to ourselves, not you. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything except the chance, maybe someday, to be a real grandmother to Mia and Evan. To show them that adults can learn and change and do better. To prove that I'm capable of loving them the way I should have from the beginning. If you're not ready for that, I understand. If you're never ready for that, I understand that too. I just needed you to know that I see what we did. I see it clearly now, and I'm sorry. It was signed simply Addison. No love, or regards, or any of the usual closings. I read it 3 times before showing it to Wyatt that night. He read it once, slowly, then set it down on the kitchen table between us. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's the first honest thing she's said to me in 6 years," I answered. "But I don't know if one letter changes anything. Do you want it to?" That was the real question. Did I want to rebuild a relationship with people who'd hurt my children so deliberately? Did I want to risk letting them back into our lives? "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Ask me again in a few months." Wyatt and I had started marriage counseling in month 2, after a particularly bad fight where he'd accused me of being vindictive and I'd accused him of being a coward. Our therapist, a woman named Dr. Chin, had a gift for cutting through defenses and making us face uncomfortable truths. She'd helped Wyatt understand how deeply his mother had conditioned him to prioritize her emotional needs over everyone else's, including his own children's. She'd walked him through the pattern of manipulation, showing him how Addison had trained him from childhood to believe that a good son never questioned his mother, never set boundaries, never chose his own family over hers. It was painful to watch him grapple with that realization. In some ways, Wyatt was grieving the mother he thought he had, coming to terms with the reality of who she actually was. For my part, Dr. Chin helped me see how losing my parents had made me vulnerable to Addison's manipulation. How my desperate need for family connection had blinded me to warning signs I would have caught otherwise. She didn't let me off the hook for ignoring my instincts, but she helped me understand why I'd done it. The counseling wasn't magic. We still fought. There were nights I slept in the guest room because I couldn't stand to be near him. But slowly, incrementally, we were building something stronger than what we'd had before. Wyatt started setting boundaries with his family in ways he never had before. When his mother tried to call and complain about their apartment, he told her he couldn't listen to that conversation and ended the call. When Peyton sent him long texts blaming me for her problems, he responded with a single sentence: "You're responsible for your own choices." When Roger tried to guilt him about abandoning family, Wyatt finally told him that family works both ways, and he was done being the only one expected to sacrifice. It was remarkable watching him find his spine after 34 years of conditioning. Painful, but remarkable. The biggest changes, though, came in our children. Mia stopped apologizing for everything. I hadn't even realized how often she apologized until she stopped doing it. Sorry for asking for seconds at dinner. Sorry for needing help with homework. Sorry for existing in spaces she had every right to occupy. All of it gradually faded away as she realized she didn't have to earn her place in her own family. Evan started talking about his feelings instead of swallowing them. When something upset him, he said so. When he was angry or hurt or confused, he told us instead of going quiet and small. He started taking up space again. Started being loud and messy and exactly as present as a 7-year-old boy should be. They stopped asking about Grammy and Pop around month 3. Just stopped mentioning them entirely, like they'd collectively decided that chapter was closed. When I eventually showed them Addison's letter in month 5, asking if they'd want to see their grandparents again someday, Mia thought about it for a long time. "Maybe when I'm older," she finally said. "Right now, I don't think I'm ready." "Is that okay?" "That's more than okay, baby. You get to decide when and if you're ready. Nobody else." "What about you, Evan?" Wyatt asked. Evan shrugged. "I don't know. I don't really miss them." "Is that bad?" "Not even a little bit," I assured him. 6 months after everything fell apart, we had dinner together as a family. Just the 4 of us. No extended family obligations, no performances for people who didn't really value us. Just us existing together in our own space. Wyatt made pasta. The kids set the table. I lit candles, even though it wasn't a special occasion, just because it felt right. We ate and talked and laughed, and somewhere in the middle of Evan telling a ridiculous story about something that happened at camp, I looked around our table and realized this was what family was supposed to feel like. Safe. Equal. Unconditional. I'd spent 6 years trying to buy my way into belonging with people who would never really let me in. I'd funded a comfortable lifestyle for people who treated my children as disposable. I'd written checks and ignored red flags and convinced myself that love just looked different in different families. But I'd been wrong. Love doesn't look like empty plates and casual cruelty, and being told to know your place. Love doesn't come with conditions and hierarchies and payment plans. Real love looks like this. Like pasta dinner on a Tuesday night with sauce on the tablecloth, and kids talking over each other, and nobody keeping score of who deserves what. I'd burned down the toxic structure I'd been supporting for years. And from the ashes, we were building something real. The screams that had filled Addison's house the night I made those phone calls had been the sound of consequences arriving after years of being held at bay. I delivered them with precision and purpose, timing the devastation to match the cruelty my children had experienced. I'd never regret it, not for a single moment, because my children deserved a mother who would protect them, even when it meant going to war with the family I tried so hard to join. They deserved to learn that they didn't have to accept less than they were worth, that boundaries were healthy, that real love never required them to make themselves smaller. And if teaching them that meant dismantling someone else's comfortable life, then that was a price I'd pay every single time. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear what you think.